It's just awful what happened. I've never done a video like this. I am in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I came here for a wedding, oddly enough, and I said to myself, one of the coolest TV shows that I've ever seen in my entire life was the Jeffrey Dahmer show on Netflix. When you think about Ted Bundy and all these other characters, you know, they've tried to make movies on these guys. They never really hit the mark. But this Jeffrey Dahmer one was something, it was on a whole nother level. It was literally, in my mind, the best serial killer docu-series that has ever been created. It was so chilling. It reminded people of just how horrendous of a person and the acts that Jeffrey Dahmer committed. Now, right behind me, if you can see up there, this is a bar called Shakers. And you know, one of the things I like about it, they have that ghost as a logo, and they have a neon sign up there in the window as well. And this is Shakers. And this place actually embraces what happened to Jeffrey Dahmer. At least this is what I've been told. That they actually, you can sign up for Jeffrey Dahmer tours. And they'll take you, walk you around the neighborhood and show you all the stomping grounds of Jeffrey Dahmer. And you know, I wanted to make this because one of the things I absolutely detest is I detest when filmmakers change the facts to make a more compelling story. One of the movies that was so bad with making up nonsense was the Freddie Mercury movie, which got all this praise. I would say it was at least 50% completely inaccurate. The recent Elvis movie was at least 50% inaccurate. So I'm the kind of person that likes to watch something and then go back, research it for myself, and decide, you know, what was or what wasn't true. And I can only tell you that most of the things that people see on television when it comes to trying to document something that really happened, it's just simply not true. You know, recently they made a movie about Napoleon. Well, how do they really know anything that was said, okay? It's not like they had video cameras, right? But you would think they could get like Jeffrey Dahmer right. You would think they could get more modern situations correct. But you know, Hollywood has to take their liberties to frame a narrative, and there's Shakers right there. And this street had a lot of bars that Jeffrey Dahmer would frequent to find men that he found attractive to abduct. Well, not really abduct. He would literally offer them $50 to take nude photos with. And they would go back to his apartment and he would kill them. And this was his favorite stomping ground. But getting back to that Netflix series, there was many things that were incorrect. And let me address one of them right away. The whole dynamic that Jeffrey Dahmer was able to get away with as many murders as he did because people, the cops specifically, were, you know, didn't care about minority complaints. I mean, it's just not true that Jeffrey Dahmer preyed on minorities because nobody would care if they disappeared. It's just not true. Jeffrey Dahmer was attracted to men's bodies. He preyed on people that he had a very crazy compulsion to see them and pose them. And, a compulsion to see what their brains would look like, what they might taste like. I mean, the guy was absolutely crazy. And this was his stomping ground right here. So that character that they made out that lived right next door to Jeffrey Dahmer, that's just simply not true. That was a lady that did have an encounter with Jeffrey Dahmer, and she did actually call the police, which actually I believe was what led to the most famous situation where he drilled a hole in one of his victims' head, and they got away, and they literally brought that person back to Jeffrey, and he took that person back up to that his apartment, and he killed the person. Now, I believe those people did sue the Milwaukee Police Department because they wrote it off as a domestic dispute, sadly, very sadly. But the reality is that the Jeffrey Dahmer situation had nothing to do with any of those issues. It had to do with all the warning signs were there. He was arrested multiple times. He was charged as a sex offender. He had to register as a sex offender. He was arrested multiple times for exposing himself. He was under suspicion multiple times for drugging people, and that's one of the reasons why he was kicked out of the Ambassador Hotel, which we're gonna go to right now.
Did you ever stop to think that this is someone's brother, nephew, uncle, cousin, grandson, or just someone's friend?
I hope you can deal with what you've done. I'm trying hard to. You almost destroyed me, but I refuse to let you destroy me. I will carry on.
He destroyed the baby of the family, and I hope you go to hell.
Only the sister of Errol Lindsay was unable to contain her rage.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again.
One of the things I want to do is just kind of sort of try and tell the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, even though I'm not an expert. But what I wanted to say was I think that everybody finds serial killers super fascinating. They make tons of documentaries and everything else. True crime is like a big topic for documentaries, movies, and so on and so forth. People just become fixed on them. The tragedy, the horrific acts that are committed. And Jeffrey Dahmer, when you talk about serial killers, I mean, he has to be the worst one. He has to be the worst one. Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, but none of them did the kinds of things that Jeffrey Dahmer did. There's the Ambassador Hotel right there. Do you see that? So this is pretty much kicks off the whole Jeffrey Dahmer story, really, when you think about it. Because Jeffrey Dahmer, he killed his first person in Ohio. He killed a jogger. He picked him up with the idea, hey, you want to go drink some beer? And the guy said yes. When the guy started talking about girls, Jeffrey Dahmer realized that he was not going to be able to, have sex with this person willingly. So he decided to take a dumbbell and smash him over the head with it and kill him. And then Jeffrey Dahmer dismembered that kid's body. And it's really windy and noisy out here. And then he didn't really kill anybody after that. The whole story really starts with the fact that Jeffrey Dahmer, as a kid, was fascinated with dead animals. And his father was into taxidermy, and he learned all this from his father in terms of, you know, some things about taxidermy. But Jeffrey Dahmer was just obsessed with anything dead. He was also obsessed with complete domination and control of his victims. And he took it to a whole nother level, dismembering their bodies, eating them, much like another Wisconsin serial killer, Ed Gein. But Jeffrey Dahmer he took it to a whole nother level because he had so many more victims. And this is really where it all started for Jeffrey Dahmer, to be the serial killer with a compulsion to commit these acts that were so great that he couldn't control himself. Jeffrey Dahmer went to Ohio State. His grades were really bad. He was always drunk. He was a complete alcoholic. His dad found out and made him join the army. He went to West Germany. He was discharged from the army, mostly because he was constantly drunk. And he came back to the United States and he lived with his grandma. Now, here's one thing I want to mention to you about the Jeffrey Dahmer story, is that most of the main locations, the Shaker Bar, the street where he used to frequent to pick people up, this Ambassador Hotel, his grandma's house, and his apartment, his most infamous apartment, are all within just a couple miles of each other. So right now, this Ambassador Hotel is only about 2 miles or so from his grandma's house, where he committed some very heinous, just totally disturbing things. But he would pick these people up originally, and he would bring them to the Ambassador Hotel. Obviously, because he didn't want to take them to his grandma's house, clearly. And so he brought them here to this Ambassador Hotel. And this is where he killed his second victim. Now, one of the things that's unique about Jeffrey Dahmer is that Jeffrey Dahmer is probably the only serial killer in history, and I don't know this for a fact, but he's probably the one, if not the only, serial killer in history that freely admitted every single thing he did, which people found appalling, that he just admitted it, like he didn't care at all. But I just don't think that Jeffrey Dahmer had any sense of understanding of human emotions. And he just told everybody every single detail. You know, another serial killer that literally told every single thing he did after he was caught was Dennis Rader, blind kill torture from Kansas. But Jeffrey Dahmer was probably the first serial killer that just literally told every detail. So you know how many people Jeffrey Dahmer killed because he told everyone. You don't know how many people Ted Bundy killed because he denied killing anyone, like close to when he was electrocuted. And then as he got closer, he tried to tell the FBI, you know, facts about himself and who he killed and where he might have killed them or stored their bodies in order to try to delay his execution, which that did not happen. Now, you know, Ted Bundy, in a lot of ways, is Hannibal Lecter, because Ted Bundy was helping the FBI with the I think it's called the Green River murders. Like, they were literally going to Ted Bundy trying to profile serial killers, which is what Hannibal Lecter was doing, right, in the movie Silence of the Lambs. But Ted Bundy was never admitting all of the crimes he committed. Even in his last final interview, literally hours before he was executed, a pastor interviewed him, which you can find on YouTube. And they asked him about the last rape murder he committed, which was against a 12-year-old girl. And he was admitting that he committed murders, but he would not talk about that one. He just would not talk about it. And he never admitted, like, did I kill more than 30 people? Did I kill 100 people? Jeffrey Dahmer admitted every crime he committed. And the second murder he committed was right here. And he gave graphic details of what happened. He picked up a man, he brought him to this hotel, and he was drugging people with sleeping pills. Sleeping pills, believe it or not. And that's what he was doing. And so then he could have his way with them so that he can position them in ways that he wanted and control them. And so Jeffrey Dahmer did that, and then he claims he woke up and he saw the person that he had lured to this hotel dead. And he said he didn't even remember committing that murder. And oddly enough, when he was put on trial, he was not convicted of that murder because he never admitted that he killed him, and there was no evidence. It doesn't matter. He was convicted for all kinds of other murders. So, but this was the one that triggered the whole thing, that literally started the compulsion to kill. That was so overwhelming that he could not stop. But all the warning signs were there. He was arrested multiple times. And he was actually kicked out of this hotel because of complaints that he was drugging people. And the strip where we went to Shakers, people had literally warned people about Jeffrey Dahmer that he was drugging people. But this is where he committed his second murder that triggered the whole wave of complete insanity by Jeffrey Dahmer. Now let's go visit his grandma's house, which is only a couple miles away.
Working out?
No.
Aren't you?
Oh, I haven't worked.
Looking at Jeff, he looks entirely normal, clean cut, very nicely dressed, responds very sociably. You still keep up your membership there, though. There's nothing to indicate, really, that he had recently killed people.
No, I've been surviving on McDonald's food for, since I moved down there.
Well, you're looking good. Grandma was saying
Thanks.
that she thought that you got quite a bit thinner, but you look fit. I don't know.
Well, I've been surviving mostly on McDonald's food. It's just so much easier just to pop into a restaurant. But
Yeah,
like I said before, it gets too expensive, and
it does.
I have to start eating at home more.
And of course, you woke up at what, 8 this morning?
Right.
And then you cleaned up your apartment really nicely so you could show us what it looks like.
Yeah, I want you to come over if you feel like it. I haven't done any dusting or vacuuming or anything. I do that on Sundays. But
Do you know who the other person is there? That beautiful blonde sitting on the couch? Yawning?
And Sherry.
That's right.
And who is this?
Yes.
That's Cousin Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, folks, we're at our third stop on Jeffrey Dahmer. And this is very interesting. Do you see that house right there? 2357. This is where Jeffrey Dahmer committed about half of every murder that he committed. In 1981, I believe, he was kicked out of the military. And he was kicked out of the military, and he decided to go to Florida. And he got a job there at a sandwich shop. And he was quickly kicked out of his apartment there because of his drinking and was not able to pay his rent. So he was kicked out of that apartment, and he came back to Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and his dad had him live right there with his grandma. He got a job at a candy factory, and well, the rest is history. He would pick up men eventually after he was kicked out of the Ambassador Hotel, and he would pick up these men and he would bring them back to his grandma's house, where he lured them here with the idea that he would pay them $50, let's say, I think it was $50, most was offered, to come back and take, pictures. And what he did was he got sleeping pills because he was working an overnight shift. And he got prescribed sleeping pills, which he used to drug these men. And then Jeffrey Dahmer would drag them down into the basement of that house and kill them. And his grandma literally had a big problem. She thought there were smells coming from the basement and so on and so forth. She had a lot of problems with Jeffrey's drinking. She also had a problem with the fact that he had stolen a mannequin out of a department store. And it all was happening right here. This was Jeffrey Dahmer's grandma's house. Now, I don't want to sit here and bother these people, but this is the house. So we're going to get in the car, and I'm sure people come here all the time fascinated about Jeffrey Dahmer, and I don't want to bother these people, but that's his house where he committed a lot of murders, and I mean a lot. Now, one of the first times that Jeffrey Dahmer had a failed attempt, a failed attempt to kill somebody was right there. And that person went and got the police. And there was a situation there. But the bottom line is Grandma eventually kicked him out. And what happened to him then was he got an apartment not far from where the notorious apartment is, and he was only there for 2 days, and he was arrested for lewd indecent exposure, and he got put in jail. And his dad stepped in to try to help him with his alcohol, his drinking, and just in general. So where did they bring him? Back to Grandma's house. And what did he do? He continued to kill people. He literally had heads and body parts hidden in that basement, hidden in his bedroom there. There's actually video of Jeffrey Dahmer on YouTube of him in Grandma's house there. And it's just, the whole thing is so sadistic and so crazy. And it's probably one of the most crazy situations that have ever happened in serial killer history. And I think that's why people are so fascinated with him. But at the end of the day, that's what happened. And so now what we'll do is we will go over to the apartment where Jeffrey Dahmer was living, where his compulsion to kill went out of control. And probably one of the reasons why it went completely out of control was because he was living by himself and he didn't have to hide things from his grandma, who then his grandma would tell his father some of the things that he did or some of the things he was doing. She didn't approve of him bringing men home there late at night at 2 in the morning. Smells from the basement, just basically all of that. And so Grandma didn't approve of that. So she did ultimately kick him out of the house again. And then we're going to be making our last stop, which is his infamous apartment. Now, there are many other Jeffrey Dahmer locations, such as the location where the candy factory where he lived. You could also hit a lot of the graves of the different people that he murdered. But make no mistake about it, Jeffrey Dahmer was, he was diagnosed as being psychotic. He was diagnosed with multiple problems. This guy clearly was not thinking straight and didn't have the ability to, I guess, control himself. And too bad all the warning signs were there. They weren't picked up. And he wasn't put in prison. The last time he was arrested for a sexual crime, where I think he tried to pick up a 14-year-old, He was in jail for a very short period of time. He was sentenced to like 5 years probation. He was forced to register as a sex offender. And I mean, you know, you would think he would go to prison for that, but no, he didn't. And he was ordered to get counseling and things of this nature. That's when his dad really tried to step in and help him and brought him back to this house. So now let's go to the most infamous location of all.
His macabre 13-year crime spree finally ended when this man, Tracy Edwards, brought the police to the infamous apartment. Like the others, he had gone there with the promise of money.
He was listening to my heart, because at a point he told me he was going to eat my heart at that point. I hit him and I ran.
What was the turning point for you that made you suddenly realize that you had done something terribly wrong, something you should be sorry for?
It was the night of the arrest. I have no memory of what happened during the 6 hours before the last victim ran out of the apartment. I heard a knock on the door, and the police were there with the last victim. They asked me where the key was to the handcuffs. My mind was in a haze. I sort of pointed to the bedroom, and that's where they found the pictures. And they yelled, "Cuff him." And I was handcuffed. And it was just the realization that there was no point in trying to hide my actions anymore. The best route was to help the police identify all the victims.
And look at this place right here. Is that crazy or what? And it's so out of place with the neighborhood. I don't know what that building is, you know, or mansion or whatever, but it's just around the corner from where Jeffrey Dahmer committed a lot of murders, which was 924 North 25th Street. And oddly enough, his apartment number was 213. Meaning, you know, 13 as in associated with horror movies and Halloween and everything else. Now, we're just kind of walking through the neighborhood. Lots of trees. I will say that Milwaukee is a very interesting, cute, adorable little town. As I was going through it, it's a lot of really cool architecture, a lot of really cool old buildings. I was really digging it. But one of the things you got to understand about Jeffrey Dahmer is every location associated with his crimes is when we're talking about in the city of Milwaukee, we're only like 4 or 5 miles apart. So when he was kicked out of his grandma's house for a second time, he came right here. They have since torn this building down. It is gone. And it's just a grass field. It's almost like for that particular apartment complex, it's almost like a backyard. But this is where Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, his infamous apartment, was. And now it's gone. And these are the apartment complexes next door. You can see Canatona Court. And there's spaces for rent right next to the notorious Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, you know what happened here was complete tragedy and complete just when one of his victims was able to escape this location, his death house, his death apartment, the police brought the kid back to Jeffrey Dahmer, which is unbelievable to think about. And then Jeffrey Dahmer killed that person. And it happened right here. The person that was made famous in the Netflix series actually did not live next door to Jeffrey Dahmer, but did have a confrontation with him right here in front of this apartment. Now, many people did make accusations that, hey, it smelled coming from his apartment. He told the apartment complex manager that, oh, you know, my freezer broke, some meat spoiled. He was complained a second time. He said his fish tank. The whole thing is crazy. He bought a Polaroid camera. He was taking pictures of his victims in different poses, and everything ended for Jeffrey Dahmer when his last victim was brought here under the, that he was going to pay them $100 to take pictures. And he slapped handcuffs on that person after drugging them, so they weren't like completely able to fight back. And that person just kind of hung out with Jeffrey Dahmer and claimed he was watching Exorcist 3. And if you don't recall, in Exorcist 3, one of the big scenes in that movie was when someone's head gets cut off. And Jeffrey Dahmer was a very sick and twisted individual. Clearly, the last movie he saw was Exorcist 3. Now, Jeffrey Dahmer was so carefree about everything that was going on. It was almost like, he wanted to get caught, didn't think anyone would suspect, or maybe he didn't think anyone would catch him. I don't know, because he was so carefree. He had dead people. How's it going? In the freezer. He had body parts in his apartment. He had barrels where he was, taking the skin off to get to the skeleton so he could keep the skeletons. I mean, everything. It's just atrocious. And it all happened right here. So the police came because that victim was able to escape, brought the police back. I think the police, basically when you read all about it, they weren't, super alarmed by it, but they did go up and talk to Jeffrey Dahmer. And Jeffrey Dahmer invited the police in along with the victim, and he invited them into he invited them in. Oops, hello. Right there. Yeah. And so I really do feel bad for the people who live near his grandma, the Ambassador Hotel, and of course this location, because so many people come by and look at it. And look at that building over there. It's like back there, the one that I went to go see. That is that building that I started. And so Jeffrey Dahmer invited the police into his apartment and basically just said, oh, he's just kind of sort of like was screwing around. And he says, oh, no worries. He would get a key and unlock the handcuffs. And that's because the cops tried to unlock the handcuffs, but the key wouldn't work. So they brought him back here. And Jeffrey Dahmer says, no problem, I'll go get the key, I'll unlock it. And then when he did that, the cops were kind of just like, looking around, and they happened to see Jeffrey Dahmer's photos sprawled all over the place with real dead people in different poses. And they literally, the cops said to each other, is this real? This is real. And Jeffrey Dahmer tried to escape. They caught him, and apparently he immediately said, immediately admitted and said that, he should die for what he's done. Now, when Jeffrey Dahmer was put into jail, he admitted everything, said that, he doesn't want in any way any sympathy, and he wanted the most maximum penalty. Yet, his defense lawyers tried to get him off on insanity, which would have put him in a mental institution. Now, I have to say, Ed Gein did a lot of the same things. He didn't kill as many people, but he did a lot of the same things. And Ed Gein was put in a mental institution, and one day he got out. But not Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was put in prison. He was kept in an area where, he couldn't interact with other prisoners. He demanded to get out of that area, which they obliged, gave him jobs in the prison. He claims to have become a Christian and believed in God. He was annoying to a lot of the other prisoners. And him and another man, were killed. The other man was a child rapist, I believe, but I'm not 100% sure. And this man killed Jeffrey Dahmer. And the man who killed Jeffrey Dahmer said Jeffrey Dahmer didn't even try. It was like he wanted to die. Jeffrey Dahmer did many interviews where he admitted all of his crimes, and his dad did a lot of the interviews with him. It was almost like his dad embraced the whole celebrityism of his son. He did ultimately write a book, and then he was ridiculed by the victims, and he shared some of the proceeds, I believe. Now, a lot of Jeffrey Dahmer's belongings were going to go to auction, supposedly to pay off some of the lawsuits and whatnot. And a bunch of money was raised, about $400,000, to buy it all and destroy it and put it in a landfill. So his freezer, all of those things were put in a landfill, destroyed and put in a landfill. But this is it right here. Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. One of the most heinous crimes, one of the most heinous murderers in history. I mean, I think you could literally say he's the most heinous because of the things that he did to his victims. And there's been other ones similar and like him. Jack the Ripper comes to mind. But these people were not documented the way that Jeffrey Dahmer was. It's just awful what happened. I've never done a video like this, but I've always been interested in watching documentaries about serial killers, just to try to understand better about what kind of insane compulsion. Because one of the things I really hate is movies where things just keep spiraling out of control. Because I'm just any sane person would not continue. I'll tell you, one of the shows that I really don't like as much as a lot of people is Breaking Bad. And why is that? Because he had wheelbarrows and wheelbarrows and wheelbarrows of money. His life was spiraling out of control where he killed people, and he's got this storage locker full of money, and you just ask yourself, when is enough? Do you not realize eventually you will be caught? Any drug dealer eventually gets caught. Anybody who commits any kind of crime, you look through history, gangsters who can control some cops by paying them off, they're all eventually caught, or they're all eventually killed by associates. And so I hate movies where it just spirals out of control, where somebody doesn't finally catch on and says, I've gotten away with it this far, maybe I should get out where the getting is good. I do think that Jeffrey Dahmer didn't want to be caught. But at the same time, the way that he was his apartment, anybody could have just walked in there and seen that his apartment was full of corpses and dead people. And in this apartment right here, he literally had a body laying on the floor of his bedroom for 3 days. How do you think someone's not going to eventually catch you? But this is how cavalier he was about it. And maybe it was because the whole thing was so surreal to him, it almost became this is how it's supposed to be. I don't know. And that's what's so interesting to learn about these people. But make no mistake, Jeffrey Dahmer was a sadistic, disturbed individual that caused a lot of pain to a lot of people, and no penalty would have been good enough for Jeffrey Dahmer. But it begs the question, if he's not insane, who is? Why do you have insane asylums if not for people like Jeffrey Dahmer? I do think that, in closing, serial killers are a thing of the past. I'm not saying one isn't going to spring up, but modern technology is so good now that people can't get away with this over the years and decades. Like Jeffrey Dahmer was killing people from 1978 to 1991. Ted Bundy, you know, when you think of Gacy and all those people who disappeared and he stuffed them under the house, you know, and people suspected them. You know, it's a different world now. There's cameras everywhere. They have a lot better ways to catch people. And it would be a lot more difficult today to get away with the types of things that these people did. It's just unfortunate that all the warning signs were there to catch Jeffrey Dahmer and stop his reign of terror, and it just didn't happen. But I don't believe it was because of the types of people he was preying on or the neighborhood he lived in. Because you have to remember something. Jeffrey Dahmer's house right here is literally located just a couple miles from every famous Jeffrey Dahmer location. I mean, this is just the area he lived in. This is the area he was familiar with. This was an apartment that he could afford. He barely worked. So, hello. And so there you have it. And this was the area. And that was Jeffrey Dahmer. And Jeffrey Dahmer is a bad person. And Milwaukee is one of the most famous things about Milwaukee is Hank Aaron. Harley Davidson and Jeffrey Dahmer, unfortunately. And this is where he was caught, and this is where he committed a lot of the most heinous acts. So thanks for watching, and remember that whenever you suspect something, report it. Absolutely report it. The police did drop the ball on this one. All the warning signs were there, and now it's part of history.
For scary videos and more, subscribe to our YouTube page, huntworld.com.